Hi, and welcome to Charlie Taylor, who is the founder and CEO of Thrive. I'll let him explain exactly what they do. But Charlie, welcome to our second of our fireside chat series, and maybe get started by you introducing Thrive and talking us through how you guys got going.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Felix. So Thrive is a technology platform which is designed to help companies be more data-driven with the hiring decisions that they make. So we know that people are important when it comes to building a company, specifically a small company, at the early stages. And humans are intrinsically quite biased when they make hiring decisions. And so we are answering the question or building a platform which helps to predict how well someone will perform in their job prior to making the hiring decision. And the more accurately we can predict that, the more chance of making the right hire, saving the company time and cost.
Fantastic. And I know that you and I will be very aware of people's biases, but some people who'll be joining us today will be thinking, hey, I've been hiring for 25 years. I've done a pretty good job of it so far. How can data tell me anything about a potential hire that I don't know already? What would you say is the core problem that they're not realizing?
Sure. So typically when a human makes a hiring decision, there are a number of types of biases, and they can fall into two categories, really. The first one are natural human biases, and this is things like fatigue and boredom and general distraction, hunger. And the second category of bias are more recruitment related, whereby you treat certain candidates in different ways depending on their past experience, or are they the first candidate of the day, are they the last candidate of the day? And all of these factors play a role in your decision making, and most of them do not correlate to any level of prediction of how well they'll perform in the role. So hiring assessments are not designed to replace the human. We still encourage that element of human intuition and human touch to the process, but they are there to help you understand and diagnose objectively what behaviors are present and which areas are more risky in a person, and where you should structure your interview to help reduce and mitigate that bias.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. And presumably, the more, as with anything else, the more data you have on a decision, the better decision can get at the end of the day. And yeah. I mean, I think in our realm, which is acting as companies' in-house recruitment functions, we're finding that more and more of our clients, I mean, it's really stark, are adopting online testing, psychometrics, tools like Thrive, to help them with their hiring decisions.
Yeah.
Are you seeing, do you think, an actual positive trend in reduction in bias and in better hiring outcomes at the end of the day? How do you measure the impact that you and companies like you are having on the industry?
I think, well, first of all, it's very difficult for a human to completely isolate bias and remove it from the process. Humans are naturally wired to have their own biases as part of survival instinct and experience and memories and so forth, which help them navigate future problem solving activities. And so it would be silly to completely remove all level of human interaction. And what we're trying to achieve here is simply improving the accuracy of how well you make a decision. And typically with small companies who don't have large budgets, who don't have in-house rigorous training, in-house psychologists and consultants, this is typically reserved for the larger companies. Then having a platform that can do that for you is a step in the right direction to simply make better hires. But this isn't something that's unique to Thrive. There is a whole body of science out there for about the last 50 to 70, 80 years, where academics and scientists have been researching the question of, can you predict human performance in the workplace? And the answer is yes, you can. And there are typically three methods that have been credibly accepted. The first is cognition, or otherwise known as general mental ability. The second is personality, namely the big five factor theory. And the third is the use of structured interviews, which is the absence of bias. So to answer your question, yes, we do see people adopting this method of improving their decisions, but I think it's still an educational process that's happening. I don't think it's a given at this stage.
That's really interesting. And so I believe that your testing focuses on the first two, the personality profiling and the general cognition. Is that right?
Yeah, so we focus on we focus on the cognition and the personality, but what we then do is, with the results, we help companies structure the interviews by answering by helping them understand which questions to ask and pose in the interviews depending on the candidate's performance so far. Rather than swaying to things like their own personal social situations or where they think they could, socialize with the candidate. If they have a very structured method of these are the areas of risk and these are the questions that you should be asking, then it helps them prepare for that.
That's really interesting. I think one of the things that we see is obviously the testing, like what you're talking about, structured interviews focused on future facing performance. That all focuses more on skills and ability over experience, and obviously that's what a lot of the body of research shows, is that experience isn't as good a predictor of future performance as previously thought. But I guess the challenge with the kind of testing that you're doing is it seems to me that you might be pigeonholing or it might be difficult for someone to what am I asking here? I guess what I'm asking is, are you saying that there are certain kinds of people who fit certain kinds of jobs and that's what the testing is, or can a certain kind of person change their mind and their results on those kinds of testing over time? Oh, good. Hello? Hello, hello. Hello? Charlie?
Yeah, so no, I understand the question. Felix, can you still hear me?
Oh, I'm really sorry. I missed you. Yeah, I've got you now.
I heard the question, and I think there's two parts to that. The first part is how accurate is previous experience as a factor or a causation for further performance within a role. And this to me was the biggest shock, because when I started building this platform, I always thought that previous experience would be the biggest predictor of someone's performance in a job, right? It's common sense, it makes sense. If I want to hire someone and I need someone that can drive a car, and someone's been doing it for 10 years, it's a good piece of evidence that they could probably drive a car well. And so, work experience, scientifically, previous work experience is a predictor of job performance, but it's not a very strong predictor. And this is because just because you've done something in the past doesn't mean that you will necessarily do it again in the future and do it well. And so, yes, it has an element of accuracy to it, but it's not as strong as people think. And so if you start to look at additional things like motivation, personality traits, the probability of showing those personality traits in the future, cognitive ability, and how likely that is to be used again, then you start to become more accurate. The second part of the question is, no, we don't take people and pigeonhole them into certain jobs. It's the other way around. So we take jobs and we look at what the behaviors are that are necessary for those jobs to perform. So let's say, for example, you take a general manager. So if the behaviors for that general manager were things like emotional intelligence, how well they can communicate, how well they can comprehend information, how analytical they are they able to be sociable in certain client situations. If these are critical behaviors for this role, we take those critical behaviors and then we assess candidates for those behaviors, and then we benchmark them against thousands and millions of other people, and that gives you an indication as to how probable those behaviors are likely to be shown within that operator.
Very interesting. And I suppose I'm sorry for asking a super compound question, but I guess a follow up on that last element that you were saying is, how elastic is the mind on behaviors? Do you find that one person over 10 years can become more emotionally intelligent or can become more risk averse? Is that something that changes or something that's sort of hardwired into us?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's probably a question more for a psychologist.
Okay. No problem.
But from my own understanding, typically when we look at things like personality traits, and they do vary, but what the research shows is typically around the late 20s, early 30s, they start to stabilize, and they stay like this within a certain degree for the rest of your life, except for certain circumstances such as trauma and certain things like that. But generally, personality traits typically stay the same once they've stabilized around late 20s.
That's really interesting. So obviously this sort of change in what makes a good hire and what's going to predict how people are going to do, you're seeing it in your line of work, and I'm seeing it in mine. Do you think that the pandemic has had an effect on how companies think about hiring and what makes a successful team member?
Definitely. So I think the pandemic, or flexibility and need to work in various different locations, they comes to light that there are certain traits within a hire that you need that are difficult to assess in an interview. Okay, so for example, one of the biggest behaviors that we often see required in a job would be autonomy or fluid thinking, which is a type of problem solving skill where when you solve a problem, there's not always one single correct answer. And these are really difficult to assess. You can imagine trying to assess that as a human yourself. It's difficult. And so the more diverse the workplace becomes geographically, and the more reliance we have on people working in various locations, the more prominent some of these behaviors become, and therefore the stronger the need to find a way to assess them. Integrity, trust, these all become stronger as people work less and less within the office, and your colleagues rely on you more, working from the home environment. All this sort of phrase of being remote ready has definitely pushed an element of that. And also because you can't meet the person face to face, or if you don't meet them face to face, again, there becomes more sort of pressure on the video or the interview stage, where there is a large element of human bias. And so again, there becomes this further need for being objective and data driven in how you conduct those interviews and the results that come out from them. But I think, standing away from the science, there's a shift in attitude, which is becoming excitingly more, it's becoming more, it's occurring more. And traditionally people would say, I don't really use hiring assessments. I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. I meet a person, I'm a very good judge of character. And all of this has suddenly been thrown up into the air, because you can't meet, or you don't always meet the person anymore, because either they work abroad, either they work remotely. People are starting to understand that there is a more accurate way to make hiring decisions with human beings. And so it's definitely a change in direction, which is becoming exciting, but still very much in its infancy. And we find that when we talk to a lot of customers, there's still an educational play.
Absolutely. And yeah, I definitely, it's been really interesting stripping away the sort of as you say, I think a lot of people put a lot of stock in meeting people face to face, the eye to eye contact, shaking the hand, and taking that away. People have had to rethink quite a lot of things. I think that's been a great opportunity to introduce new kinds of testing tools. What are the biggest, so now that that's been taken away, you know, people saying, well, you know, I'm a great judge of character, my gut's never wrong. Are there any other sort of big challenges that you see when you're trying to get people to shift to online testing psychometrics? And
yeah, I think there's a challenge of privacy and sort of anxiety around using a methodology to assess a very complex entity, i.e. a human. So you take a human that's non-linear, that's often irrational, that's quite inconsistent, and then you apply this scientific method. People have some anxiety around, you know, the effectiveness of that, and the privacy of being quite intrusive in terms of asking your candidates to undertake such an assessment, and then being you know, the holder of that information. So there is sort of anxiety around privacy of data, using science to assess a human in the first place. So there's those two methods of sort of objections. Obviously, cost is always one as well, because just like a lot of things in HR, you're dealing with often sort of quite intangible methods of trying to evaluate return on investment. So it really depends on how the company is geared up, you know. And some companies have thousands of people applying, or even hundreds of people applying, and they can only interview maybe 5, 6, or 7 people. And so from an operational efficiency point of view, assessments can be quite helpful in reducing the time you spend on interviews. But I would say the main objections are, you know, data privacy, sort of getting comfortable about using science on humans when it comes to a high stake decision of hiring and employment, and then where we evaluate the cost within the supply chain of recruitment.
That's really, really interesting. And last question from me, Charlie. So where are you taking Thrive as a product and as a business?
So for us, hiring assessments are just the beginning. Specifically, hiring assessments. So for us, I mean, hiring assessments have been around for a long time, right? So for us, where we wanted to differentiate, and where we are differentiating hiring assessments, is we are making them incredibly simple to use for smaller and medium-sized companies without sacrificing the quality. So very high, you know, globally leading quality of assessments at a very low cost and very simple to use for companies. But for us, this is just the foot in the door. The next stage on Thrive is to start evaluating also your internal performance of the company. So if you look at a company a little bit like a beehive, you know, you've got bees flying in, you've got bees in the existing hive, and you want to optimize both sides of the equation, right? People coming in and people who are already within the business. So existing employees, things like what skills are missing compared to competitors, promotions, development, how do you structure development plans within the company, how do you predict things like turnover and attrition within the business, and employee well-being, and so forth, and combining this all into one really self-service, easy-to-use platform that can track and assess incoming talent and understand and assess internal talent that's already there, and give the management team a very tangible understanding of, okay, this is what we're good at and this is where we need to improve, and start to understand talent in a much more competitive nature that's tangible and actionable.
That's really, really interesting. And I definitely think I always sort of say to our clients when they're considering going external for a job or staying or advertising it internally and see who's there, we're in a world where the skills that you need to do your job are changing on a yearly or many times, or even change multiple times in 1 year. You need to learn new technologies, new processes, new ways of thinking. So if you're able to find people in, let's say, an area of your business that's becoming, you know, having less demand for it, or, you know, becoming less relevant to the future of the organization, and you can reskill them to do one of the more future-facing parts of your organization. That's fantastic, because they've already got the DNA of the organization sort of internalized, and I really do think that talent's going to start thinking more and more about in-house talent pools as well as external. And I think having the data to back that up would be so useful.
Definitely, because I think it's surprising, right? If you go to a CEO or a management team of a company today of 200, 300, 400 employees, and you ask the management team, how analytical is your company? How competitive? How good at communicating? How strong are the social skills within your company? And then break it down team by team, and then ask the question of, how does that compare to your competitors? I mean, the majority of companies are not going to be able to answer that tangibly. I have 500 people in my company. This is how analytical they are. This is how good they are at leading. This is how good they are at social skills. And this is where we compare to our competitors. It's difficult to understand that information. Mm-hmm. And so if we can materialize that and make it tangible, accurate, and rigorous, you have 500 people, majority are very strong on social skills compared to your competitors, but these are the behaviors that you're lacking on, and that will inform your hiring strategy and your internal development strategy. Then for me, that's a very exciting way to optimize and build your company performance going forward.
Absolutely. Well, very exciting to see what you guys get up to in the future. Thanks for joining us today. Sorry for a couple of technical glitches to start with, but have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, Felix. Cheers now.
Charlie.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.